Yeah, so MapR has built a distribution of Hadoop. It's the MapR data platform with Hadoop. And what happened was the founders of MapR basically set out to solve the problems that Apache Hadoop couldn't. And that was specifically for enterprises. And so the data platform actually meets the requirements that businesses typically have through areas like disaster recovery, business continuity, high availability, things of that nature, removing single points of failure. These are all things that customers were very adamant about needing if they wanted to put their business on that platform and not have to worry about being up every night worrying about disaster. Yeah, absolutely. Overall, the investment has really started showing through for big data. Typically, what I see are people who either are completely on board and understand and get their minds completely around it, or people who look at it and say, I can't quite understand it, it doesn't fit, maybe in the future, it doesn't look like it's a fit right now. And typically in those cases, 6 to 12 months further down the road, they've talked to one of their friends who has started doing big data and they say, oh my gosh. And something that they hear from someone else finally is what clicks and makes big data suddenly an understandable topic for them. Sure, yeah. And I think once people get their heads around what big data is, the investment is a no-brainer in most cases. You know, it really depends on the industry that you're in. So certain industries have been early adopters and they don't fear change, and they have enough solutioning, they have enough engineering experience. They're in an industry that has to move fast if they want to stay ahead. Sure. In those industries, it becomes pretty easy to just go in and jump straight in and identify the biggest use cases and say, here's our biggest problems, and fix those. Mm-hmm. Any company of any size that wants to get into big data needs to line it up against a line of business. Yeah. And I think this is why certain industries are more predisposed to big data and have less problems getting in. Yeah. And so my third implementation of Hadoop, the most critical implementation of Hadoop, was in digital advertising. Sure. And this is an area where being able to support 60 billion transactions per day is not a small task. Sure. And so that industry, that business, the whole business is digital advertising. So it is effectively the line of business. Sure. When you start comparing that to other industries and you start looking at this group or department within a company and saying, oh, we could do this or we could do that. If it's tied to the line of business, it will succeed within a line of business. Well, our product, we basically deliver a complete supported API of Apache Hadoop. So if people are working with Apache Hadoop, they can just work with our platform. And we've actually went through an initiative of delivering on-demand training for free for the year of 2015. Sure. And so we have a new on-demand training platform on MapR's website, mapr.com/training. Sure. And it's full online, interactive, on demand. It's platform agnostic, and it's vendor neutral. Absolutely. So I had one of my friends tell me, come on, vendor neutral? And I said, well, if we didn't talk about our own product, we would in fact not be vendor neutral, but we have to talk about ours. But we actually show comparisons of our product as well as Apache Hadoop, so people can understand when they're hearing this in the industry, they know what any differences might be. Absolutely. And so people need to get trained on the general understanding of it, but if they're working with the open source technologies, they're working with our platform as well, because we support more than anyone else. You know, if I were to roll back to my first implementation of Hadoop and use this as an example, we started getting it implemented. We had a large team of engineers and architects working to define this. So from a computer science perspective, it's blatantly obvious. If you're in computer science, you have the ability to be in this area. Sure. But that's not the end of the story. And so as we got our first implementation done, we started trying to get the business users on board. And the problem in the early days was that the technologies were so new, they were so different from anything they'd experienced before, there was constant pushback. Change is difficult for many people. And part of my learning was that I really took that for granted, and I just wanted people to use the new stuff. Well, I'm computer science background, so it's explainable. But the real great thing that's happened over the last few years is that the technologies have actually gotten to the point now where people who have good, solid business understanding, they have core experiences with things, tools and technologies that the businesses want to use for doing business intelligence and other types of data analytics. One of the skills that I think pretty much everybody out there should have some level of is something like SQL. It's a standard, it works, it's pervasive and ubiquitous. And so those tools are actually what has really helped people in the industry adopt big data, because they don't have to understand all of the intricate details like 5 or 6 years ago. They can step back and say, look, you're delivering a solution to me. SQL is one of those mechanisms. And there's an open source project that really started hitting big last year called Apache Drill. And this is a tool that people can download. They can launch it right on their own laptops and start doing queries on data on their computer. And as soon as they're ready to go to the big data, all they've got to do is point at the cluster and run the exact same queries.